Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. If these stories help you soften the day, you're warmly invited to follow, share, or leave a quiet review, so this gentle corner of the night can find a few more curious minds. Tonight, we drift to the edge of the desert, where the air cools quickly after sunset and the sand holds the last warmth of the day like a secret. We arrive on the Giza Plateau at that in-between hour, when the sky turns from pale gold to indigo, and the first stars appear, not in a rush, but one by one. Somewhere beyond the dark line of the riverbanks, the Nile is flowing even if we cannot see it. And in Egypt, the river is more than water. It is rhythm and season and the quiet logic of life. You can feel that rhythm here before a single stone is lifted, because everything around this great project is organized by ordinary needs. There are hands that bake, hands that carry, hands that measure, hands that twist rope, hands that smooth a rough edge until it becomes true. Tonight's story is about the building of the Great Pyramid, but not as a thunderous legend. We'll hold it closer, like a warm cup in both hands, and look at it the way it was truly made, through patient days, careful planning, and a community that learned to move together. Imagine the plateau not as a silent ruin, but as a living place. You might hear low voices in the dark, the soft clink of pottery, the creak of wooden frames, and the steady exhale of animals resting before morning work. A settlement nearby settles into itself for the night. It is not a palace and not a prison, but something practical and human, rows of simple rooms, storage spaces, kitchens, courtyards, and the kind of order you find in any town that must feed itself and rise early. A few lamps glow like distant fireflies, not bright, not dramatic, just enough to gather around. You can picture grain being checked for tomorrow's bread, water jars being topped up, a blanket shaken out, a small joke passing between tired friends. Above it all, the sky is wide, and the moon is a calm witness. In our minds, we can let the pyramid be new again, not weathered, not broken, but smooth with pale limestone that catches moonlight gently, as if the whole structure is listening, patiently too. This is the feeling we'll return to again and again. A monument made of routine, a wonder built from daily life. And as we walk through it, we'll keep the story warm and positive, noticing skill, coordination, care, and the quiet pride that can live inside shared work. So settle your shoulders, let your breath loosen, and together, at a slow and steady pace, we'll step into ancient Egypt and begin calmly with the first light of an ordinary day. Tonight, the world feels wide, but our focus is simple. We follow the Nile because it is the gentle clock that keeps this whole country on time. Even when you are far from its banks, you can sense its influence like a slow heartbeat carried through the land. In the Old Kingdom, people spoke of the year in seasons, shaped by the river. There was the season of flooding when the water rose and spread, turning fields into shining mirrors. Then the season of emergence, when the water withdrew and left behind dark, rich silt, soft as powdered earth between the fingers. And then the season of harvest, when the green thinned into gold and the work of gathering felt like a calm closing of a long breath. This rhythm was not an interruption. It was a promise. It told farmers when to plant, boatmen when to travel, officials when to count, and families when to expect the world to change. Along the banks, reeds whisper in the evening breeze, and narrow canals thread into the fields like careful stitches. You can imagine simple water lifts creaking softly, buckets rising and pouring, the same small motion repeated until a patch of soil drinks enough. Boats glide where roads would be slow, low hulls carrying jars, grain, timber, and stone, moving with a steady efficiency that feels almost effortless. And when the river is generous, the country breathes easier. Granaries fill, bread becomes dependable, and big projects can be supplied day after day, not by hurry, but by planning. The Great Pyramid, for all its size, belongs to this ordinary calendar. When the flood season arrived, many fields were underwater and work could shift. People who tended crops could join state projects for a season, bringing their strength, then returning home when the land was ready again. It was not a life torn in two. It was a life with phases, like the moon, like the river. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the language of coordination. Lists, tallies, deliveries, teams assigned, days marked by sunrise, and the cooler hour afternoon. Even the stones obey a kind of schedule. Quarries are worked when it makes sense. Transport happens when waterways are open, and the plateau waits patiently for what arrives. And in the middle of it all, there is food, there is rest, there is shade. The small kindnesses that make large efforts possible. So, as you settle deeper into your pillow, imagine Egypt as a place that knows how to move with its seasons, not rushing, not resisting, simply working when the moment is right and resting when the light asks you to rest. In the next quiet step, we'll follow that rhythm into the settlement at Giza, where a town of workers wakes, eats, laughs, and steadies itself for another day. By morning, the plateau is awake in a quiet way. The sun lifts over the eastern edge of the world, and the air is cool enough to make you want to walk a little farther just to feel it. Not far from the pyramid site, there is a settlement built for work, but also for living. It is a place of straight paths and simple walls, of courtyards where footsteps soften in the dust, and doorways that hold back the glare. You can imagine the smell of hearth smoke lingering from early fires, and the faint, sweet, sour scent of fermentation from clay jars set aside. This is not a scene of chaos. It is a practical town, arranged to feed itself, to store supplies, to mend tools, to sleep, and to begin again. Rooms are close together, so voices carry gently. Someone is always sweeping, always carrying water, always checking a basket, always tying a bundle with reed cord. In one corner, there are storage areas, jars sealed with clay, sacks of grain, stacks of dried fish, and baskets of onions that keep well. In another, kitchens and ovens, low, warm spaces where bread can be baked in steady waves, timed to the needs of the day. There are workshops, too, where simple miracles happen. A broken handle is replaced, a copper edge is sharpened, a rope is twisted tighter, and a wooden sled is checked for cracks before it meets stone. Even rest has its place. Sleeping quarters are plain but predictable. Mats, blankets, personal items kept close, the comfort of knowing where you belong when the day is done. And there is community in the small moments. A greeting in passing, a shared sip of water, a story repeated from last week, laughter that rises and falls quickly like a bird taking off and landing again. Near the edges, animals shift in their pens. Goats or cattle kept for milk and meat, part of the steady provisioning. There are places where ash is dumped and broken pottery gathers, the quiet evidence of ordinary meals. And somewhere, a scribe sits with a reed pen and a small palette, turning the day into marks, names, tallies, deliveries, and rations. That quiet writing means someone is thinking ahead, making sure ovens have grain, crews have water, and tired bodies have a place to rest. Even in the busiest season, the settlement can feel dependable, a town that runs on practical care. So when we look toward the pyramid, we do it with new eyes. Behind every stone is a kitchen, a storeroom, a water jar, a repaired tool, a rested body, and a community that knows how to begin again. And inside that town, there is a warmth that feels like the center of everything. Not the heat of the sun on stone, but the steady warmth of ovens, fed and watched with patience. Before the heavy work begins, fires are coaxed back to life. Embers are nudged, fuel is added, and the first thin smoke rises into the pale morning. Grain arrives in sacks and baskets. It is poured, measured, ground, and sifted, the sound of stone on stone becoming a soft percussion that repeats without hurry. Dough is mixed with water, pressed and folded, then shaped by hands that know the texture by feel. The loaves are simple, practical, and comforting. Food designed to travel well, to satisfy, to keep a body steady. And nearby, in large clay jars, another quiet process is unfolding. Beer in ancient Egypt is not a luxury or a party. It is daily nourishment, thick, lightly sour, made from grain, safe to drink, and easy to share. You can imagine the jars lined up in rows, their surfaces cool in the shade, the slow bubbling hidden inside. People move through this work with a kind of calm pride. They are not lifting blocks today, but they are making lifting possible. A project like the Great Pyramid does not begin at the quarry. It begins here with calories, water, salt, and rhythm, with enough bread baked at the right hour, with enough drink prepared for the heat, with enough storage so tomorrow does not feel uncertain. Even the scent tells a story. Warm grain, faint smoke, damp clay, the mild tang of fermentation, a gentle reminder that civilization is often built first in kitchens. Rations are portioned with care. Bread is stacked in baskets, beer is carried in sealed jars, and everything is moved carefully. Because it does. A small delay in the ovens becomes a delay on the hauling path, so the work of feeding is treated with the same seriousness as the work of stone. You might imagine a shaded spot where people gather, eating quietly, sitting close enough to share news, stretching sore hands, letting the body feel ready. Then the baskets empty, the jars lighten, and the day can begin. In the next step, we'll follow this nourishment outward to the crews themselves and to the bonds that turn many individuals into one steady effort. Once the day has been fed into the body, it can be fed into the work. People gather in the cooler air, where shadows are still long and the stone has not yet warmed. There is a feeling here that is easy to miss if you only think in headlines. This is not one faceless mass. It is many small groups, each with a role, each with a rhythm, each with a sense of belonging. A foreman calls out, not in anger, but in order. Names are answered, tools are checked, and the day is divided into tasks that can be completed. Some will be at the quarry, splitting and shaping. Some will be on the hauling paths, guiding sleds, managing ropes, keeping the motion smooth. Some will be on the plateau itself, receiving stone, placing it, tapping it into position, and checking lines. And some will stay back in the settlement, keeping the ovens warm and the jars full, repairing what breaks, replacing what wears out. To make something enormous, the mind must shrink it into the size of a day. So crews form, and within crews, smaller teams. A few people who know each other's pace. A few people who can read a glance or a hand signal or the shift of weight that means now. Over time, identity grows, not only in the work, but around it. Work gangs could even have names that sounded almost playful, the way teams do, turning effort into pride. And when you picture the Great Pyramid rising, you can picture that pride rising too. The quiet satisfaction of a line kept straight, and the steady joy of a heavy load moving as one. In the background, scribes keep track, because memory needs marks. They note who worked where, what arrived, what was used, and what is needed next. You might imagine a strip of linen tied as a marker, a bundle of rope slung over one shoulder, a sip of beer taken before the sun grows sharp. Someone cracks a small joke. Someone rolls their shoulders, and then the group finds a shared tempo. Footsteps matching, voices counting, the work becoming less like strain and more like coordination. There can even be friendly rivalry, a hope to do the job well, to be the crew known for steady hands and clean lines, because people like to be good at what they do. And in the next step, we'll walk with them toward the quarry, where the day's first loud sound is often the clean, satisfying strike of tool against rock. In the early hours, before the light turns sharp, the path toward the quarry feels almost gentle, softer still. You walk over packed earth and scattered gravel, and the plateau begins to show its working edges, places where stone has been cut, where tools have been set down, where yesterday's dust still lingers in quiet folds. The quarry is not a single dramatic pit. It is a landscape of pale limestone, stepped and opened over time like pages being turned. There are ledges, channels, and clean faces of rock where the stone has been persuaded to separate along its natural seams. As you come closer, you hear the first steady sounds of the day. Not shouting, not chaos, more like a workshop waking up. The tap of stone pounders against rock, the scrape of a copper edge, the soft hiss of sand used to smooth a surface, and every so often, the small, satisfying crack that means a block has loosened in the way it was meant to. Limestone here is abundant and workable and bright. In the morning light, it can look almost creamy, a color that seems to hold the sun without glaring back. Workers move with familiarity. Some clear debris from a cut, some wet a line, some check the shape with a practiced glance. A block begins as a rectangle, but it becomes a true piece only through care. Corners squared, faces evened, small flaws corrected before they grow. You might imagine the feel of it under the palm. Cool, slightly gritty, leaving a pale dust that clings to the lines of the skin. Tools are simple, but the skill is not. A copper chisel must be kept sharp, a wooden mallet must be sound, and stone pounders must be chosen for weight and grip. There is a rhythm to the work that protects the body. Strike, pause, breathe, lift, set down, adjust. The quarry teaches patience, because stone does not respond well to impatience. Nearby, someone is shaping smaller pieces, not massive blocks, but wedges, chips, and packing stones that will later be used to settle a course into perfect alignment. Someone else checks ropes, because if a rope fails, the day becomes heavier for everyone. And as the sun rises, you begin to notice the quiet organization. Work areas are divided. Tools are shared and returned. Water is brought at regular intervals. Shade is found when possible, because even in the best planned day, the desert asks for respect. This is where the pyramid begins each morning. Not at the top of a legend, but here, with measured blows, careful cuts, and people who know that a great shape is made from many small, accurate surfaces. In the next step, we'll look closely at the tools and materials that made such accuracy possible, and how simple objects, wood, rope, copper, stone, became an entire system. When you imagine a pyramid, it is easy to imagine complex machines. But in the Old Kingdom, much of the work was done with tools that could fit in a pair of hands. That simplicity is part of what makes it feel so human. Start with wood. Wooden levers, wooden handles, wooden sled runners, smoothed by use. Wood does not look like power, but it is, because it turns a body's effort into a longer reach, a better angle, a safer lift. Then there is rope. Rope made from plant fibers, twisted and retwisted, checked constantly for fraying. It is humble and it is essential. A rope gathers many people into one motion, and it allows a heavy object to become a shared responsibility rather than an impossible weight. And then there is copper. Copper is soft compared to stone, so it must be cared for. Edges are sharpened, straightened, reworked. Chisels and small blades can shape limestone, especially when used with sand as an abrasive. You can picture a worker pausing not from weakness, but from wisdom, stopping to restore a tool before it fails. Stone itself is also a tool. Harder stones can be used as pounders, striking limestone to break and rough shape. The sound is different from metal, deeper, duller, more like a drumbeat against the earth. Add to this the measuring tools that keep everything honest. Plumb lines that hang still, straight edges that reveal a wobble, simple levels, sighting points, and marked chords that help a team hold a line across distance. Even a small error repeated becomes a big one, so the act of measuring becomes a kind of daily meditation. There are baskets, too, and carrying yokes, and jars for water. There are fiber pads to protect skin and shoulder. There are sledges, their runners polished by sand and time, ready to slide across prepared paths. And always there is the ground itself, packed, leveled, cleared of loose stones, dampened when needed to reduce friction. In the settlement, some people specialize in making and caring for these objects. A rope maker twists fresh fiber. A carpenter replaces a cracked runner. A metal worker re-edits a copper edge. Tools are stored, counted, and returned because losing a chisel can slow a whole chain of work. When you place all of these things together, you begin to see a system, not a system of gears and engines, but a system of routine, care, and cooperation. A tool is only as good as the hands that maintain it. A plan is only as good as the people who can repeat it day after day without breaking, and that is why the pyramid feels steady rather than frantic. It is built with objects that invite repetition. A lever you can use again tomorrow. A rope you can retwist at night. A blade you can sharpen until it shines. And in the next step, we'll see how that steady attention extends to the ground itself. The quiet art of leveling, drawing straight lines, and aligning a monument with the sky. Before a pyramid can rise, the ground must become trustworthy. Not perfect in a magical sense, but reliable, level enough, measured enough, and marked enough that thousands of stones will agree with one another as they stack into height. So the work slows down here, and that slowness is part of the beauty. You can imagine surveyors and foremen walking the site in the cool hours when shadows are long and lines are easier to read. They play stakes, stretch chords, and check angles again and again, because certainty is made through repetition. A plumb line hangs from a simple frame, pointing straight down without opinion. A straight edge is laid along a surface, revealing any high point that needs to be tapped down, any hollow that must be filled. There is a quiet satisfaction in this kind of work. It has no spectacle, but it has a feeling of rightness, like smoothing a sheet until the wrinkles disappear. To level a broad area, they might use water in channels or basins, letting the surface of water show what level truly means. Water is calm, and it does not lie. If one side is higher, it tells you. If one corner is low, it tells you. The land is adjusted, not violently but patiently, scraping, filling, tamping, checking. Small marker stones are placed where lines must meet, and pale chips are cleared away so a chord can sit cleanly on the surface. Then come the lines that organize the shape. Chords are stretched taut, coated with pigment or dust, and snapped, leaving a straight mark on stone like a clean breath. Right angles are established with careful geometry, simple but powerful. And all of this happens while the sky turns overhead, steady as always. Many have noticed that the Great Pyramid is aligned with remarkable precision. How exactly a team achieved that alignment can be discussed in different ways, but the calm truth remains. They watched the heavens carefully and used them as a guide. They could sight on stars, tracking their movement, or use the sun's shadow at certain moments, returning to the measurement until it held. It is a reminder that high technology can sometimes mean high attention, a mind that notices, a hand that repeats, a team that agrees on the same reference point. As the base becomes true, the plateau begins to feel like a prepared stage, not for performance, but for steady labor. Stones will arrive, but they will arrive into an order already drawn. Each course will have a place to belong. Each corner will know where it is meant to be. And even before the first visible layer is set, you can feel the pyramid as an idea turning into a plan. In the next step, we'll follow a single block as it leaves the quarry, meets the sledge, and begins its slow journey across the sand. Not as a struggle, but as a shared rhythm. Now the day's work becomes motion. A block has been cut, checked, and shaped enough to travel. It rests for a moment on the ground, pale and solid, as if it has always belonged there, until a team arrives with a wooden sledge, ropes, and calm purpose. The sledge is simple. Two runners, a platform, cross pieces that hold weight without complaint. The block is guided onto it with levers and small adjustments, not with force alone. A lever lifts a corner. A stone chip becomes a wedge. A hand signals, and everyone moves at once, gently, together. Then the ropes are set, thick cords looped and checked, ends held by many hands. You can picture shoulders settling under the strain, feet finding a stable stance, knees soft, ready to step. This is not a sprint. It is a slow, patient pull. Before they begin, the path is prepared. Loose gravel is cleared. The surface is packed. And then, one of the quiet tricks of the desert, water. A small amount of water can be poured onto the sand ahead of the runners. Not enough to make mud, just enough to make the grains cling slightly, reducing the way dry sand piles up in front of a moving load. It turns a dragging resistance into a smoother glide. The science is simple, and the effect is kind. Then comes the rhythm, a call perhaps, or a short chant to unify breath and timing, not for celebration, but for coordination. 1, 2, and the sledge moves, a few inches at first, then a steady slide that becomes almost hypnotic. The sound is a low scrape, softened by damp sand. Rope fibers creak, footsteps press and release. You can feel how a group becomes one body when it shares a single task. Someone walks alongside, watching the runners. Someone watches the rope for twisting. Someone keeps the line straight with small gestures, preventing drift. If the sledge begins to veer, a lever corrects it, and the group adjusts as if it has practiced for years. Because it has. Along the route, there are pauses, not dramatic stops, just moments to breathe, to sip water, to shift a grip, to let the muscles reset. A project like this is not sustained by bravery. It is sustained by pacing. And in that pacing, there is something restful. Even the pyramid is built in intervals, the way a long story is told in gentle sentences. When the block reaches a staging area, it is set down carefully, not dumped. A piece of wood is removed. A wedge is tapped free. The stone rests again, waiting for its next movement, as calmly as if it has not traveled at all. In the next step, will widen out from the hauling path to the river itself, where boats and canals turn distance into something manageable, and where the Nile carries stone as naturally as it carries light. If the desert is the work site, the river is the highway. The Nile makes Egypt feel connected, like one long breathing line running through the land. Heavy things that would exhaust a team on dry ground can glide on water with quiet ease. So when you picture the Great Pyramid, picture boats as well. Not romantic ships with billowing sails for adventure, but working boats, sturdy, low in the water, built to carry what the country needs. Along the riverbanks, life gathers. Reeds rustle. Birds skim the surface. Fishermen pull in nets with slow patience. And near the places of loading, the mood shifts into purposeful order. Stone blocks are brought to the water's edge. Ramps of packed earth lead down to quays. Ropes tighten, creak, and relax again. A block is guided onto a boat like a careful guest, balanced and secured. The water does not rush, and neither do they. When the current is favorable, the river does much of the work. When the wind is right, a sail helps. When neither is ideal, oars and poles can still move a heavy load with steady determination. It is not fast, but it is reliable. And reliability is the true luxury of large construction. The trip itself becomes a kind of quiet travel. You can imagine the boat sliding between green banks, passing palms and fields, passing villages where children run along the edge for a moment, then peel away, laughing. At night, the river turns dark and reflective, and the stars seem to double. A lamp on a boat becomes a warm dot drifting through cool air. For the pyramid, the river is especially important for certain kinds of stone. Some limestone is cut near Giza, but finer white limestone was quarried farther away, and granite for interior spaces came from much farther south. However, each journey is arranged. The principle is the same. Water makes distance gentler. Closer to Giza, canals and basins can bring boats nearer to the plateau. Paths connect the landing points to the worksite, so the load can transition from floating to sliding, from boat to sledge, from river rhythm to desert rhythm. You begin to sense how many layers of planning sit beneath a single block's arrival. Someone decided which day it would leave. Someone noted when it reached a waypoint. Someone ensured food and water would meet the crew who would receive it. A great monument is made of stone, yes, but also of schedules, of counting, writing, checking, and repeating. And that is why the building can feel peaceful, even at scale. The river is patient, and the work learns patience from it. In the next quiet moment, we'll listen for a real voice from this system of transport. A daybook kept by a supervisor noting trips, deliveries, and the ordinary logistics behind an extraordinary shape. There is a special comfort in finding a real voice inside a vast project. Not a heroic speech, not a legend, but a simple record. The kind of writing that turns a huge undertaking into a series of ordinary days. In one surviving diary, we meet a man named Merer, a supervisor moving with a small crew along the waterways. He is not describing wonder. He is describing work. Trips made, stone loaded, hours spent, routes followed, and arrivals noted with the calm clarity of someone who wants tomorrow to go smoothly. Imagine him at the edge of the water in the early light. A reed pen rests in his fingers, and a small palette holds dark ink, ready to make marks that will outlast the morning. He notes the movement of fine limestone, the kind chosen for the outer facing. Stone that will be seen, stone that will catch the light. Much of that fine stone came from Tura, across the river, where the limestone is especially bright. So Merer's days become a gentle loop, quarry, boat, canal, landing, and back again with the same attention each time. Some days are steady. Load, secure, push off, drift, steer, arrive. Other days require waiting, for the wind to turn kind, for the current to cooperate, for an official gate to open, for a channel to be clear. And in the diary, waiting is not failure. It is part of the schedule. It is the quiet truth that large things move at the speed of coordination. What's soothing about this record is how unremarkable it feels. Mera is not trying to impress anyone. He is simply making the work visible, because when thousands are involved, visibility is a form of care, a note that a shipment has left, a mark that it has arrived, a tally that says the day stayed on track. You can picture a small boat gliding in near Giza, ropes thrown, a load received. Someone checks the stone, someone checks the count, someone checks the marks, and the next step begins with hardly any fuss. In that way, the pyramid grows like a living thing, not through mystery, but through reliable repetition. A river trip completed, a delivery logged, a crew fed and rested. And when you let your mind settle on this, the whole project becomes strangely peaceful. It is simply people doing what they said they would do, day after day, with enough order to make the work feel safe. Sometimes he notes where the crew spends the night, tied to the bank, listening to frogs and insects and the soft slap of water against wood. Sometimes he notes meetings with officials, the small handovers of paperwork and seals that make movement legitimate. It is all so calm and so real that you can almost feel the papyrus drying in the evening air. In the next quiet moment, we'll imagine the pyramid, not as it looks now, worn and stepped, but as it once appeared, smooth, bright, and softly shining, like moonlight shaped into a hillside of stone. Now, let the pyramid become new again in your imagination, not broken, not rough, not stripped by time, but dressed in its finest surface, smooth white limestone, fitted so closely that the joints nearly disappear. This outer casing is what most people never truly get to see. Today, the pyramid shows its core stones, rugged and weathered. But long ago, the outside would have looked like a single luminous form rising from the desert with the calm certainty of geometry. Picture the blocks brought for this purpose, finer, brighter, chosen for how they held light. Some came from quarries across the river, and their arrival would have felt like receiving something delicate, even though it was stone. A bright face is not forgiving. Any bump, any careless edge, any slight misalignment would show. So the work here is slower, more exacting, and quietly proud. Stone is placed, checked, tapped, and checked again. A wedge is adjusted by a breath of space. A surface is smoothed with abrasive sand until it feels almost silky under the hand. From a distance, the pyramid begins to change character. It no longer looks like a pile built upward. It looks like a single calm slope, a man-made mountain that seems to belong to the sky. In the day, sunlight would slide down its faces like water. In the evening, it would turn soft and pale, then deepen into a gentle gray-blue as night arrived. Under the moon, it could glow, not like a spotlight, not like glass, but like chalk under lamplight, bright enough to feel present, quiet enough to remain soothing. You can imagine a traveler on the river, seeing it from far away, a shape that does not move, but seems to settle the mind because it is so stable, a triangle that holds the horizon in a steady embrace. Even the air around it would change. Heat would rise and shimmer in the day. At night, the stone would cool and breathe out its warmth, making the nearby air feel a little softer. Centuries later, much of this casing would be taken away for other buildings, leaving the rougher core exposed. But tonight, we can keep it whole, smooth, bright, quietly complete. At the top, the point would have caught the earliest blush of dawn, and from the base, if you looked up, the faces might seem to dissolve into the sky, because the surface was so continuous, so quietly clean. Even the desert wind, brushing along that slope, would sound different, a soft hush over smooth stone. In bright sun, some would squint and smile because the pyramid could look almost white, like a sail made of stone. And in the blue hour after sunset, it would hold the last light longer than the sand, lingering softly while everything else darkened. In the next quiet step, we'll return from the shining slope to the bodies that built it, to the midday pause, the shade, the water, and the steady wisdom of resting before the heat asks too much. By midday, the desert reminds everyone that pacing is not optional. The sun climbs high, and the light becomes sharper, flatter, almost weighty. On the plateau, stone warms underfoot. In the quarry, dust turns brighter. Along the hauling paths, the air seems to hold still for a moment, as if it is listening. And this is when the day gently folds into a pause. Not a collapse, not a defeat, just the natural rhythm of work that knows the limits of the body. You can picture people stepping into shade where it exists, beside walls, beneath simple awnings, under the edge of a storage shelter. A strip of linen might be stretched between posts. A reed mat might be propped against a wall to make a small pocket of cool. Water is brought in jars, and cups are passed hand to hand. Bread is eaten slowly, not because there is time to waste, but because the body does better when it is treated kindly. A small amount of beer might be shared as well, nourishing and familiar. Someone reties a sandal strap. Someone rubs a sore shoulder. Someone checks a hand for a blister and wraps it with linen, firm but gentle. In another corner, ropes are inspected. Fibers are smoothed, frayed ends are trimmed, knots are retied, because a rope that fails under load can injure and delay. A wooden runner on a sledge is checked for wear. A copper edge is honed against stone, brought back to usefulness. A scribe sits apart in whatever shade he can find, making the day legible, marking which crew worked where, what was delivered, what is still expected. The pause is also social. A short story is told. A complaint is laughed at. Someone mentions their home village by the river, the smell of wet earth after the flood, the taste of fresh fish, the feel of cool water on a hot afternoon. And for a moment, The pyramid is not the whole world. Life is bigger than a worksite, and that thought can be comforting. Then the heat begins to ease almost imperceptibly. Shadows lengthen again. The air starts to move, and the body feels ready to return, not because it is forced, but because the worst of the sun has passed. This is how endurance is made, not through intensity, but through respect. Work, then rest. Effort, then water. Stone, then shade. A few minutes of stillness can reset the whole body. The heart slows, the mouth tastes water again, and the mind becomes clearer, which matters because placing stone demands calm attention, not only strength. Then, when the work resumes, it does so as a continuation, not a restart, as if the day simply inhales and exhales. In the next gentle moment, we'll widen our view to the unseen web that makes such pacing possible. The provisioning system, the deliveries, the storerooms, the people whose work is care day after day so the plateau can keep moving. When you stand close to the pyramid, it is easy to focus only on stone. But the true miracle is the support beneath it, the quiet ecosystem that keeps thousands of lives steady enough to do careful work. Think of grain first. Fields along the river, measured and tended, harvested and stored. Granaries that hold the year's security behind thick walls. From there, grain becomes flour. Flour becomes bread, and bread becomes strength. Think of water, jars filled and carried, canals maintained, schedules that ensure the worksite does not go thirsty in the brightest hours. Think of salt and onions, dried fish and dates, simple foods that travel well and restore the body. Think of livestock, animals raised and managed, not as decoration, but as dependable nourishment. Meat for certain days, milk for others, hides and bone used for tools. Then think of the people whose hands never touched the biggest blocks, and yet, without them, no block would move. Bakers who time their ovens like clocks. Brewers who watch fermentation as patiently as a farmer watches a field. Carpenters who replace a cracked beam before it becomes a hazard. Rope makers who twist fibers into lines strong enough to gather many bodies into one pull. Metal workers who keep copper edges alive through constant care. Potters who make jars that hold water without leaking, who fire clay into something trustworthy. Scribes who track rations, shifts, deliveries, turning complexity into sequence. And boatmen, always boatmen, moving supplies along the river in the quiet hours, reading current and wind like a second language. All of this forms a gentle web. You can imagine it at night when the plateau quiets. A bakery still warm with residual heat, a storeroom being checked, a ledger being updated, a rope being repaired by lamplight, a small cart being packed for morning. There is also administration in the background, officials counting harvests, planning distributions, sending goods where they are needed so a distant village's grain can become tomorrow's bread at Giza. This web is what makes the pyramid feel possible, because it makes daily life feel secure. When people know that food will arrive, that water will be shared, that tools can be repaired, they can give their attention to accuracy, and accuracy is everything here. A block placed slightly wrong affects the next. A line drifted by a finger's width becomes a visible error later. So, the provisioning system is not a background detail. It is the foundation of precision. The pyramid rises because the community beneath it is cared for, organized, and steady. In the next quiet step, we'll look at another side of care, the way bodies are tended, injuries handled, and health protected, so the work can remain calm, sustainable, and human. In a place where stone is moved and tools are struck, bodies will sometimes ache. A shoulder strains, a hand blisters, a foot turns at the wrong angle on uneven ground. What matters is how a community responds. And here, the evidence suggests something quietly reassuring. People were not treated as disposable. They were valuable because skill and experience are valuable, and because a project that lasts years must protect the people who carry it. Imagine a small space set aside for tending, not a modern clinic, but a shaded corner, a bench, a jar of clean water, strips of linen, simple ointments. A wound is rinsed. A bandage is wrapped. A swollen joint is rested. A worker who needs a lighter task is given one. A day's work is long, but the goal is continuity, not exhaustion. Even in ancient medicine, there is a gentleness that feels familiar, attention to cleanliness, to comfort, to practical remedies made from the world around them. Honey can soothe and protect. Plant oils can soften skin after dust and sun. A splint can hold a bone steady. A cloth can turn pain into something manageable. And over time, bones can heal, which means someone allowed the healing. You can also picture prevention as part of the routine. Rest in the hottest hours, water carried regularly, food distributed reliably, tools maintained to avoid accidents, paths cleared to reduce slips. The same careful mindset used to align stone can be used to care for the body. And beyond the physical, there is the quiet healing of community. A companion offering a sip, someone else taking a turn with a heavy rope, a joke that lifts the mood for a moment, a shared understanding that tomorrow will be easier if everyone is still standing. This kind of care does not need to be romanticized. It can be simple. It can be ordinary. And that ordinariness is what makes it soothing, because it means the pyramid is not only a monument to power, it is also, in some small way, a monument to cooperation, to the idea that large work can be done through planning, skill, and the steady protection of human limits. So, as you rest, imagine the plateau not as a place of relentless strain, but as a place where effort is balanced with repair, where the day includes shade as well as sunlight, where hands are washed, bandages are tied, and pain is met with practical kindness. And when night comes, rest itself becomes part of the healing. A mat laid out, a shoulder eased, a foot elevated on a folded cloth. Small repairs, done early, keep a person steady for many more ordinary days. And those ordinary days are what the pyramid is truly made of. In the next step, we'll return to the rising shape itself and follow how the pyramid grows course by course through progress that is incremental, patient, and quietly impressive. The pyramid does not leap into the sky. It rises the way a shoreline forms, grain by grain, day by day, course by course, each layer settling into the one beneath it until the whole shape feels inevitable. When the first courses are placed, the work is close to the ground. Blocks arrive and are guided into position with levers and wedges, nudged rather than forced, and then checked again and again, because the base is where every later line will take its cue. As the pyramid grows, the question of height becomes a question of access. How do stones reach the higher levels quietly and safely without turning the plateau into chaos? Many ideas have been proposed over the years. Most involve ramps of packed earth and stone, built and rebuilt as the pyramid rises, like temporary paths that shift as the needs shift. You can picture a broad incline, firm underfoot, wide enough for a sledge, with its edges reinforced, its surface kept smooth, its slope chosen to make effort steady rather than punishing. On some days, the ramp is extended. On other days, it is repaired after wind and traffic wear it down. And as the pyramid climbs, the ramp climbs too, always slightly unfinished, always changing, always part of the living work. The beauty is in the incremental nature. A block is hauled up a short distance. It is set down. The crew rests. Then another block follows. No single moment has to feel impossible. The project stays within the size of the human body, repeated thousands of times. Up close, you notice the small choreography. Someone dampens the path. Someone checks the rope. Someone places a wedge. Someone taps the stone into its final breath of alignment. And above, on the growing platform, a few workers receive the load, guiding it into the right place as naturally as setting a bowl on a shelf. Sometimes you can imagine the sound of tapping, a soft stone-on-stone percussion like gentle knocking, and then a quiet, final silence when the block sits true. As the courses accumulate, the steps of the core might be visible like terraces. Later, casing stones will soften those steps into smooth faces, but for now the pyramid is a work in progress, with scaffolds, ramps, staging areas, and open space for movement. It is not a single structure yet. It is a site, alive with paths and pauses, with planning and recalculation, with the steady humility of adjusting what needs adjusting. And in that humility, the pyramid becomes calmer, not more dramatic. a mountain of repetition, a monument made by keeping today manageable. In the next quiet moment, we'll step away from the outer bustle and slip inside into the cool corridors and measured chambers where the air changes and the sound becomes stone silent. Inside the pyramid, the world changes. The desert brightness falls away behind you, and the air becomes cooler, stiller, and oddly soothing, as if the stone is holding a long breath. A passage slopes gently, and your footsteps sound softer, absorbed by the walls. Light would have been simple here. A small flame, a lamp cupped by a hand, enough to show the next few steps, and no more. And that limited light makes every surface feel closer, more intimate. The walls are not decorated in the way later tombs might be. They are purposeful, blocks fitted and aligned, their weight doing the quiet work of staying where they are meant to stay. You move deeper, and the silence thickens. Outside, a work site has many sounds. Inside, the pyramid offers only small ones. The faint scrape of sandals, the whisper of cloth, the soft crackle of a lamp's wick. Then there is the grand gallery, a space that surprises even in imagination. It rises, tall and narrow, with corbelled walls stepping inward as they climb, guiding the eye upward along a corridor of geometry. You can picture how the air would feel here, cool, dry, and slightly echoing, with sound returning gently rather than sharply. Even the temperature feels like part of the design. Outside, heat moves like a veil, but here the stone steadies it, offering the body a quiet, even cool that makes the mind slow down on its own. You can imagine a lamp's light touching the walls and revealing tiny variations, a faint sparkle of mineral grains, a soft shadow along a joint, the careful patience of fitting one block to the next. Beyond, the chambers lie like calm rooms hidden in a hillside. The king's chamber, built with massive granite blocks, feels steady and restrained, as if its purpose is to be simple and enduring. Above it, relieving spaces help distribute weight, a quiet reminder that even sacred architecture must obey physics. Elsewhere, the so-called Queen's Chamber sits lower, quieter still, connected by passages that feel like thoughtful routes rather than dramatic tunnels. We do not need to treat these spaces as puzzles tonight. Instead, we can feel what they offer: coolness, order, the sensation of stone arranged with intention. A place designed to last longer than any single day. And when you return in your mind to the outside, you can sense the two worlds at once. Above, sunlight and movement. Inside, shadow and calm. Together, they make the pyramid feel like more than a pile of stone. It is a carefully shaped environment, built to hold meaning as well as weight. In the next step, we'll touch that meaning gently, the beliefs and values that sat beside daily life, not as a lecture, but as an atmosphere that helped people feel their work belonged to a larger order. In ancient Egypt, belief was not only something spoken in temples. It was woven into the way people saw the sun rise, the river return, the seasons repeat, and the stars keep their slow appointments in the night. Order mattered. Balance mattered. Continuity mattered. And when you live in a world where the Nile arrives, retreats, and arrives again, it is easy to feel that life is meant to move in cycles, not in straight lines. The pyramid belongs to that feeling, not as a monument to noise, but as a monument to steadiness. For many, the pharaoh was connected to the idea of cosmic order, a figure meant to help the world stay coherent, the fields fertile, the calendar reliable, the community protected. So building a pyramid could feel like participating in stability itself. But that meaning did not erase daily life. It sat beside it. A worker might pause to make a small offering before a shift, not with drama, but with the same simplicity as taking a sip of water. A scribe might mark the day and quietly thank the gods for a safe journey along the canal. A baker might whisper a phrase of gratitude when the ovens held their heat. These gestures are not loud. They are the soft texture of a culture that sees the world as connected. Even the sky participates. The sun's path, so dependable, becomes a kind of reassurance. The stars, returning each season, feel like a promise kept. And the pyramid, aligned with care, seems to join that wider geometry, a human-made shape agreeing with the heavens. You can imagine evenings in the settlement when stories are told. Not only stories of kings, but stories of floods and harvest, of distant relatives, of the river's moods, of the way the moon looked last week. Children might listen, half awake, while adults speak softly, saving energy for tomorrow. On certain nights, there might be a small sense of celebration, not loud, but communal. A shared meal, a song hummed rather than sung, a story about a good flood year, or a quiet hope spoken into the dark that the coming season will be gentle. And in those small gatherings, the pyramid is present, but not overwhelming. It is simply what people are doing, the way a community might build a bridge or dig a canal or raise a wall, something shared, something that will outlast them, something that gives the future a firmer ground. Tonight, we hold that meaning lightly. We don't need to solve every symbol. We only need to feel the calm that comes from belonging to a place, to a season, to a team, to a story that is bigger than the day, but made from the day. In the next quiet moment, we'll return to the plateau at night, to lamps, soft voices, and the simple comfort of knowing what tomorrow will ask and what tomorrow will bring. When the sun slides down and the desert begins to cool, the plateau changes its voice. The sharp brightness softens. Shadows lengthen. The wind becomes gentler, and the sand, which looked pale and dry at noon, turns deeper in color, like toasted grain. Work slows without argument. Tools are gathered. Ropes are coiled. A last delivery might be checked and set in place for morning. And then the day becomes evening, the way a long exhale becomes quiet. In the settlement, lamps appear one by one, small flames behind clay, protected from the breeze, casting warm circles on packed earth. The smell of bread returns, not from urgency, but from routine. A few loaves baked to be ready at first light. Voices are low. People talk the way tired people talk, in short exchanges, in gentle humor, in the comforting language of, "We did enough." Some sit outside for a moment because the night air feels kind against skin that has been in the sun. They look toward the pyramid, and even unfinished, it is immense. From somewhere farther out, you might hear the faint bark of a dog or the soft chatter of insects that only speak when the heat has gone. A donkey shifts its weight and size, and the sound feels strangely comforting, like proof that life has returned to its slower, nighttime pace. But at night, immensity can feel peaceful. The edges blur slightly. The pale stone takes on the color of moonlight, and the whole shape seems to rest. You can imagine distant points of light near the worksite, not fires, not spectacle, just the practical lamps of those finishing a task, guarding supplies, or guiding a late return. Somewhere, a scribe closes a day's account. A tally is complete. A note is made. A brush is cleaned. In another corner, someone retwists rope by lamplight, fingers moving automatically, as if the body has learned a quiet craft it can do even when half asleep. Others are already settling down. Mats laid out, cloaks folded as pillows, water jars placed within reach, a few final words shared with a friend, then a comfortable silence. A light breeze passes through the courtyards, lifting the edge of a linen cloth, and then settling again, as if the night is tucking everyone in. Above, the sky opens. Stars appear. Fewer than on a mountain, perhaps, but clear enough, steady enough. The moon, if it is there, makes the desert look soft, almost like fabric. And in that calm, tomorrow becomes less of a question. It is a familiar shape, waiting, bread to bake, tools to check, stones to move one more time in the shared rhythm of many hands. In the next and final step, we'll take the long view and let the pyramid become what it truly is in this story. Not an impossible feat, but a patient accumulation of ordinary days until the mind can finally set it down and rest. Over the years, the pyramid rises the way a memory forms, not in a single flash, but through repeated moments that settle into one another until they become solid. A morning in the workers' town, a loaf of bread cooling in a basket, a rope checked for fraying, a sledge runner smoothed, a block tapped into place until the sound changes and everyone knows it is true. When you think of it this way, the Great Pyramid becomes less like a mystery and more like a calm lesson in endurance. Big things are often built from small things done well. A plan that respects the river, a schedule that respects heat, a system that feeds and cares for people so their attention can remain steady, a culture that knows how to repeat without losing heart. And so the pyramid is not only stone, it is organization, it is patience. It is a community agreeing, day after day, to move together. Even the desert participates. Wind clears footprints by morning. The sky keeps its rhythm. The Nile returns with its seasons. And the pyramid, course by course, becomes a quiet companion on the horizon, a shape that says, without words, that ordinary effort can become something lasting. Tonight, as you rest, you do not need to carry any of the weight. You don't need to remember measurements or names or dates. Let the details drift like sand, settling after a step. All that matters is the feeling. Warm ovens, cool stone, soft lamps, and the steady comfort of routine. If a thought tries to wake you, give it something simple to rest on. Picture a baker's hands brushing flour from a wooden board. Picture a boat sliding along dark water, carrying pale stone that looks almost like moonlight itself. Picture a carpenter running a palm along a sledge runner, checking for a rough spot, then smoothing it until the wood feels kind again. Picture a crew pausing together, sharing a cup, breathing in unison, letting effort remain steady and gentle. And picture the pyramid's face, once smooth and bright, reflecting the sky in a quiet way, not shouting its presence, only holding it. In this story, greatness is quiet. It sounds like measured footsteps, like a chisel being set down, like a lamp being covered, like a town falling asleep all at once. Imagine the plateau now, fully quiet. The work has ended for the day. The settlement is asleep. The river is moving in the dark, turning the moon's light into a long, trembling line. And the pyramid, smooth and pale in your mind, holds the night gently, as if it were built for stillness as much as for greatness. Let your breathing slow, the way evening always slows the world. Let your thoughts become fewer, like stars fading into dawn. And when you are ready, let the story loosen its grip, and let sleep arrive in its own unhurried way. Good night.